Hi guys, welcome back to Atlas Uncharted. We're continuing on our series recently about talking about goal setting and talking to a few interesting people about how they think about this and how they've approached life. So I've got with me a really interesting guest, Michael Lee. I'll let himself introduce him pretty much right away actually. So Michael, tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Anthony, and obviously Wayne, for inviting me on to speak tonight. I really appreciate your time. It's 9:30 p.m., so it's mad respect to you guys for continuing to hustle. As Anthony has said, my name is Michael. I'm 25 years old. I graduated from UNSW studying a Bachelor's of Commerce, so I'm very much a business type guy. And I've now been working for 3 years at Antipodes Partners. So we're a global long-short equity hedge fund managing about $10 billion, divided into different sectors. We all cover different sectors. There's a team of about 30 of us. I cover US and European software companies. And yeah, you might be wondering, what does global long-short equity mean? It basically just means buying and selling stocks. So we can make money from both share prices rising and falling. And outside of work, at Antipodes Partners, I'm also a private investor and advisor to Sydney Science College, which is Sydney's first STEM private high school. And beyond that, I love volunteering and I go to church on Sundays.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. So the topic for today, like with any sort of new guest, is I kind of just want to interview the guest, sort of get to know how they've sort of thought about life. And in chatting with Michael a bit beforehand today, one thing that I think is really impressive about Michael is how he thinks about goal setting, which is why I thought he was a fantastic candidate to sort of fit into the bigger theme of these episodes we're trying to do. How you sort of describe the way you think about goal setting?
Yeah, goal setting is a very, let's call it, multifaceted topic. There's a lot of self-help books, in Dimmicks or probably most people these days are on Audible, who will look at different books and have many different ways of slicing and dicing this idea of setting goals. I think for me, like put very simply, goals are important because they provide clarity to what you're doing and what you intend on doing. It's both backward looking and forward looking. People set goals because they need to hold themselves accountable to a KPI or a metric or an objective. But it's also forward-looking in the sense that it provides you direction and focus on what you know and realize is important to you. So yeah, that's how I think about goal setting, just very simply. But happy to delve into any dimensions of that if you want to go further.
Yeah, I think that was a really good introduction in terms of there's all these points that we're definitely really keen to sort of flesh out over this episode today in terms of what it means in terms of accountability, looking backwards, as well as looking forward, getting new perspectives on things. But yeah, I guess if you were to sort of summarize your strategy, like what do you actually do, and we've talked about like the frameworks about how you think about things, how would you sort of describe that?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different frameworks that you can use when it comes to goal setting. I think for me, what will be quite interesting in my story is I get the quick story is I think the best framework that I've used for goal setting was actually from a book that I read many years ago when I was in first year university. Just dropped out of actuarial studies after 1 week. So I clearly wasn't the best at maths, and all I had left was a commerce degree at UNSW. And at the time, I was very lucky. I found a cadetship opportunity at Deloitte, which is a Big Four accounting firm. And when I was working there, I was at the time thinking about becoming a partner, which is basically the highest level, at Deloitte. And I tried to find books that could help me think about how to get there. And there was a book that I read, which was called How to Make Partner and Still Have a Life. And when I read that book, there were a lot of surprisingly interesting chapters, and one of them was about goal setting. And it was one of the early chapters, probably chapter 2 or chapter 3 of that book. And that thing really stuck with me, and which was this idea of this very simple like XY plane, like a table. And on the X plane, there was this idea of thinking about the different roles in your life, whether you're a brother, a son, a husband, a churchgoer, a worker, a tutor, a mentor. That's the x-axis. And then on the y-axis, that's time. And basically, the idea is at different years of time, you would set different milestones for the different roles that you had. And that exercise is really good because, like I said earlier, when you start thinking about different roles that you have in your life, for example, like a student, that's a simple one that everyone could probably relate to on this video. Is, for me, it was a university student at UNSW, and first year objective would be to finish first year, second year objective would be to finish second year, and so forth. But beyond that, being able to set milestones for different roles was a really good exercise in beginning to understand where are the synergies between different milestones, and actually, try to figure out whether those milestones that you're hitting are synergistic in any way. Maybe, studying for business could also lead itself to helping you, find a job at a hedge fund, or being able to support your church in an investment committee role. This idea of trying to find examples where you can have 1 + 1 = 3 is a really good exercise that comes about from this goal setting framework. And, there's this whole idea of being able to use it both backward looking and holding yourself accountable, and forward looking in terms of providing you clarity and focus on what matters.
You mentioned sort of you have different roles to sort of think about. I think that's really interesting in terms of, if I'm thinking about like the first thing that would come to mind if a normal person sits down and tries to write out goals, they might just have like a laundry list, essentially. Yeah. So like, you mentioned some examples already, but like, did you have any like big picture ideas of working out what sort of roles you had in life, or was it just like whatever you came up with in that sense?
Good question. I think, I think every high school kid, myself included, would just write a laundry list of, maybe 25 things that you want to achieve in life. and if you're very diligent, a bit more diligent, you would try to rank them. I think the problem tends to be that a lot of people try to believe that they can do everything. If you write down 25 goals, you believe you can do 25 goals. One of the role models that I look up to is Warren Buffett, who's a very famous American investor, now like 90 years old, but has been in the space doing investing for many years. And one of his great frameworks about goal prioritization is he will tell you to write down the 25 goals you have in your life that you want to do, rank them from 1 to 25, and then he'll tell you pick the first 5 and ignore the other 20, because that will detract your focus from the 5 that actually matter. I think for me, that's something I didn't realize in high school, but I think I began to appreciate a lot more when I was in university, that there are a lot of things that every, young person wants to do in their life and believes they can do. I think all of us like to think we're invincible when we're young. But the reality is, if you want to do something well and you want to do something great, it often requires intense focus. And, if that's your sole priority, there's a lot of other goals that is just noise to you. And I think that's the hard thing to swallow for a lot of younger kids. But I think it comes with experience and time and wisdom to be able to realize like what are your true priorities in life and being able to say no to things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in high school, not so much I had really an idea of what were my priorities for goals, but no, I think in university, I think I had a better sense of it because I understood more about who I was and what mattered to me.
Yeah.
And so I think when you can come to that realization of your identity and understanding yourself more, I think you also are able to prioritize your goals a lot better and realize what's noise and what's, signal.
That's really interesting. I think I'll ask you for, I'll give you some time to think about it in terms of what are some examples of, you reckon, goals that you sort of sidelined when you started thinking about it from that perspective that you thought were like not as important as other things? Maybe while you can take a bit to think about it, I'll bring up like a quick one that I know was important for me. So I think straight out of high school, like everyone, I was pretty ambitious with things. And one of the big crazy goals I had was I basically wanted to do the equivalent of like living 2 lives at once, in the sense that like I really wanted to go into chemistry in university and become a full chemistry academic and do research in a chemistry field I enjoyed. So my particular interest is more about chemical biology / biochemistry. So I was sort of eyeing that stuff out. It looked really cool, and I did look up to a few people in that field as well. But then on the side of that, I also wanted to teach chemistry, do chemistry education, probably work in high schools, do some advocacy on that front. And so that was basically like 2 full-time jobs, because an academic life in uni is already hardcore. And then there's all this random teaching stuff, which culminated into this that I also wanted to do. And so that was way too much. But in terms of like, maybe not giving up, but changing it a little bit, that's how I realized I needed to pivot to, I'm still interested in chemistry academia, but my research interest, instead of a more like pure chemistry field, is now in chemistry education, so that it is a lot more synergistic with what I'm doing here. So it's not like I'm doing 2 things at once. They actually tie into each other.
Yeah, that's like a 1 + 1 = 3.
Exactly.
Thing right there. So, no, I think that's great. It kind of reminds me of that triangle, of like, I think there's like social life, grades, or sleep. And it's like you can only pick, 2 of the corners. You can't have all 3 corners. But no, see, if you can figure out a way to do 1 + 1 = 3, you can get all 3 corners of the triangle.
Yeah, exactly. Although even like,
so to speak,
even the setup I've got going now, I'm like, that's still more than one normal workload. So we'll see if I have to cut that down in the future. But that's what I've got so far. I guess on your end, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, on my end, a lot of things. When I did that exercise of, on the x-axis, the different roles in my life, on the y-axis, time, and then milestones for every different role. One of the ones that I had was actually learning Chinese. Like, I think, my parents are from Hong Kong, and but I was born in Australia. And a lot of people actually have told me that, to do business, maybe it would be good to learn Chinese, because
that's a really good point. Yeah.
It's, China's a booming economy. Nearly probably almost the first biggest economy in the world now. It's just basically, coming up against the US. But yeah, it would be, you would think it would be a great opportunity if you knew Chinese and knew how to do business interactions with Chinese people.
Yeah.
And I had this goal actually of like 5 years worth of milestones back when I was in first year university to learn Chinese. And, I deferred it for 1 year. I didn't do anything. I deferred it for a second year. Didn't do anything. And by that time, I think I realized, I'm not hitting any of these milestones. And it's basically just a waste of space on my goal setting framework. So yeah, it's that you kind of have to know when to call it quits. Sometimes, in life, there are things you'd love to do, but then you just don't devote time to it. You don't have enough skills for it, learning it. I wasn't ever good at languages. So, it probably wasn't the best use of my time anyway. But yeah, that was one of the many goals that I've had to sacrifice along the way, because of the fact that I wasn't devoting enough time to it. I didn't have the skills for it. But I think it's for the best, because there's always an opportunity cost when you do something. It's the act of forgoing something else. So yeah, there's many examples for me of things that I've had to sacrifice. It's not just Chinese. It's also relationships. Thinking about having a girlfriend. It's also, like exercise and wanting to cycle. At one point, I thought I was going to be a cyclist, and that never happened. Yeah, so lots of different examples come to my mind.
Yeah, I think those are some really important things, I guess, for any listener to think about as well. Because I think when you were listing like the roles you had in mind, a lot of them were sort of focused on like careers and stuff. But yeah, I think some other stuff that definitely, if you're a student freshly graduating, I think a lot of like health goals, as well as social goals, definitely really important to think about. And it's really easy to fall out of those when you lose the schedule of high school.
Exactly, yeah. Because I think the shape of the triangle expands to what I call like a decagon. You've got all these different corners of, interests that you have to compete with. It's not just like grades, sleep, social life. It's like family, it's like friends, it's like having a relationship, it's like your work, it's like other exams you may have outside of university, like me doing professional exams. And you realize there's so many different corners of your of the shape, and it only gets more difficult. But that's why, something like that goal setting framework I described, where if you have it clear in your head of what roles you have in your life and what milestones you're trying to meet over time, I think it clarifies you and allows you to be able to better serve all those different corners of the shape that you're dealing, which is your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that framework is, it's not just the backward-looking, forward-looking tool. It's also it's also a highly useful tool for the present as well. Yeah, for helping you focus on what matters and being able to deal with life.
Yeah,
because life throws a lot more corners at you than just free. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I think in terms of you're mentioning this sort of giving you this confidence and stability in whatever's happening in the present. Yeah, I think that's a really understated sort of benefit of really planning things out.
Yeah. The thing about goal setting is, it's a very fluid exercise. It's not one where you should take yourself too seriously. Like many things in life are uncertain, and there's a lot of things that can derail your progress towards certain goals that you may have. And so, yeah, I think often, the danger of goal setting can be the fact that you lose sight of the journey and focus only on the end destination. Yeah. I think being able to use goal setting well entails, having the discipline to focus on those goals that you care about, i.e., the end destination, but at the same time balancing that and respecting that, the journey matters just as much.
Yeah. That's a really good point. What things do you think have helped you sort of stay grounded in that sense to like ensure that you're enjoying the journey as well? Is that just something you just remind yourself of, or are there like other factors at play that sort of help you sort of accomplish that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, typically what happens with me is I tend to focus a lot on the future, i.e. the end goal. And yeah, that can often be a bad habit if you start overthinking things and you start going crazy. But where I've found over the years, particularly more recently, which has helped me focus on the now rather than the future, is having good mentors. Like that's something that I 100% would recommend to people. This was something I wish I was told to when I was in high school, but I only really found out towards the end of my university career. And I found a mentor back in 2017. The guy's name is Albert Hung, and he is a chairman of a hedge fund, Australian Eagle Asset Management. And yeah, he was really good to me. He often will ask me about that framework of goals that I've got, and asked me, about and really try to test me and ask me about, have you been meeting those goals? Why haven't you? And often, I think he's really good because he's almost like a guardrail. He often reminds me to slow down at times and tell me that actually, these goals that you have, maybe you're not hitting them because like you're not ready for them yet, and maybe it just takes a bit more time, and that's okay. I think having mentors, and not just mentors, but good family and friends as a support network that can keep you grounded is just as important as just having mentors. And for me, I've been very lucky. I've got a really good family that has often reminded me to play board games with them, play mahjong with them, and go out to dinners with them. And it's stuff like that. It's stuff like all stuff in the moment that So I think at the beginning I used to think that those were things were waste of time because they weren't helping me focus towards the milestones of the future that I've set for myself in this goal framework. But I think maybe it's me getting older, but I realized a lot of those things that you do in the present are just as important, and you shouldn't forget about them or disregard them.
That's a really good point. It's a constant reminder about how important it is to try and create that supportive environment around you in terms of the people you hang with. It's almost like it's creating an echo chamber, but in a good way. Because it distances you from a lot of that like mainstream discourse sometimes that as you mentioned gets a bit
I think
too
for
much.
friends and families, I think it's a bit more personal, so that's why I think it's a bit harder to be objective with you. But then I think I would say with mentors like Albert Hung, who's like 65 years old, not a family member, but just knows me from church. He can be pretty objective with me.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to sugarcoat anything. It's probably better
Yeah.
that he doesn't. But yeah, like everything, it's a balance. You don't want 100% negativity towards you in terms of feedback. You obviously want some
Yeah.
positivity too. So yeah, it's a fine line of balancing that as well, of feedback. But yeah, to your point about like how do you make sure that you're able not to just get overwhelmed thinking about your future goals, but rather also having one foot also in the present is, I think for my mentor, he's been really good as a guardrail in terms of, I think, just asking me what I have done today and what I'm happy about, and what I'm thankful for. I think that's a really good exercise for a lot of kids as well. Something that I've done a lot more seriously now is actually thinking about the things that I appreciate every day. Yeah, that's a really great way to focus on the present.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, like, what are you thankful for today? For me, it's being able to talk on this podcast tonight. It's having an afternoon to just walk around and appreciate Epping, and having those great opportunities to just rock up to Atlas when it's on a Monday when I wouldn't think it would be open, but it's open, and then you get a chance to talk. It's stuff like this that I just love, and I think a lot of students will I think forget that, particularly when I can understand why. Like when it's an HSC period, if you're a year 12 student, like you kind of just want to think about the end and just get that A time, move on with your life. But I think it's something I would say is for the year 12 kids is don't focus too much on just the A time and instead try to smell the roses along the way.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. Before I get that, I'll just say I absolutely second your idea about being great, like expressing gratitude for things. I keep trying to do it, and I'm good for like a week, and then I forget about it, and then I remember it a month from now. But it's definitely really helped as well with that. The classic stuff where there's like, as you mentioned, you can either think about it or like if you're like what I try to do, because I do a bit of journaling. If I'm on the ball, I can just write down like 3 things I'm happy for in the day. That's what like a lot of those like self-help people tend to say, but I've actually really enjoyed it. I think
it's a cathartic experience. I think, to actually reflect on today and think about like what you're thankful for, and I think it puts you in a better headspace when you go to bed. Because I think in this current world, there's a lot of things you can be worried about and anxious about. If you're like me working in a hedge fund, you're worried about stocks every day and whether they're going down or up. And people ask me, how do you stay sane as a 25-year-old looking after, billions of dollars? And I tell people, outside of being Christian and praying, it's actually just reflecting on my day every night before I sleep and being thankful for what I have. There's a lot of, I think, in Australia, because I think in a great environment that we've grown up in, I think we take a lot of things for granted. I volunteered in Sri Lanka back in 2016. With Global Village with UNSW, and I had a chance to really see kids who lived in rural areas with very little, like not even having a computer, not even having shoes to go to school, and it's those kinds of experiences where but yet they looked happier than a lot of kids in Sydney, and you wonder why, and the thing is, like, I asked a few of these kids actually, like. Yeah, it's like what makes you guys so happy? Because like I can tell you back in Sydney, there's a lot of things that I realize you guys don't have. But then they said to me, no, I'm just happy with what I have today, and I think it's great. I think these kids have realized how to be happy. In fact, better than the kids in Sydney who you would think would be happy. And it's really powerful, this idea of gratitude. And frankly, some of these Sri Lankan kids seem to be a lot more wise than some people, in probably developed countries. So I've listened from the people that I've met in Sri Lanka on a volunteering program to say gratitude.
I think unfortunately, I guess even to like spin it to, I guess, our situation, I think it's another obvious sign about why we need to do something about this education system, because there are greater social factors at play, but I think for sure that the way we learn in schools probably has a huge impact in how, as kids growing up, how much we appreciate things, how much we know about the wider world, our strategies for coping when things get stressful.
Yeah, I think that's it's a big issue. I think in yeah, I'm not saying that just because we have computers and we have shoes that we're better off. In a lot of ways, I think even Sydney here, there are things that we struggle with, like I think mental depression. Is one that a lot of kids I think actually struggle with, or maybe not to that severe degree, but even anxiety, just about the stress of having to do homework, having to do exams.
Yeah.
What's the point of it all? I think they've got their own challenges too. I'm not saying that they don't, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of challenges, and in a lot of ways, the education system doesn't really help that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah. Even though I don't think the motive was such, but often, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think doubling back to, I mean, we're kind of on this topic anyway. You mentioned, the HSC really shouldn't be the end goal.